could a single street hold a decade of terror? The 3100 block of Weymouth Street in Philadelphia, long infamous for drug violence, became a battlefield before dawn. Flash grenades shattered the morning calm. Armored vehicles rumbled down narrow lanes. Helicopters hovered overhead. Red lights reflecting on brick facades. FBI, we have a warrant. Come out with your hands up, shouted officers through loudspeakers. Windows rattled. Smoke curled into the sky. Within minutes, men and women were handcuffed and led to awaiting vehicles as neighbors peered from behind curtains, witnessing history unfold. This was not a random raid. For over 10 years, a 24-hour open-air drug market had poisoned this neighborhood with fentanyl and cocaine. Federal investigators, in a coordinated sweep with local authorities, moved decisively against the Weymouth Street trafficking organization. 29 arrests were made that morning, dismantling a criminal network that had extended its grip from Puerto Rico and California to Philadelphia's streets. Helicopters and drones monitored every movement, while evidence response teams collected meticulous data to preserve the integrity of the legal case. Authorities described the operation as historic. This is how you safeguard American cities from coast to coast, said an FBI official, emphasizing interagency collaboration and years of meticulous planning. The gang's reach was not confined to Kensington. Its tentacles stretched across multiple neighborhoods, exploiting systemic vulnerabilities. Dealers rotated shifts like a business schedule. Surveillance and counter-surveillance were constant. Communications were destroyed or encrypted. Local residents, meanwhile, lived in fear, often too intimidated to report crimes. The neighborhood had become a zone where freedom was overshadowed by the omnipresence of organized crime. Strategically, this operation underscores the federal government's commitment to restoring order in urban centers. Under President Donald Trump's administration, domestic security initiatives have been strengthened with federal and state resources combined to address the dual threats of narcotics and violent gangs. The raid demonstrates how intelligence-driven law enforcement can dismantle networks that operate like corporations, balancing civil liberties with the imperative of public safety. Experts note that while aggressive, such actions protect not only local communities, but also national credibility, signaling that the U.S. will not tolerate criminal syndicates undermining societal stability. The human impact was immediate. Residents witnessed their streets reclaimed. Children could walk to school without encountering drug transactions. Longtime business owners previously under duress felt a sense of cautious relief. Yet the psychological scars of years of violence cannot vanish overnight. Families remain vigilant, aware that criminal networks adapt rapidly. The presence of law enforcement, while necessary, also raises questions about surveillance and community trust. Is safety worth the heavy machinery and helicopters that pierce the quiet of early morning? As the smoke cleared on Weymouth Street, one question lingered. How many neighborhoods across America suffer in silence, waiting for a decisive strike against the organized chaos that thrives in the shadows? And more importantly, will the federal government sustain this level of vigilance to protect every block, every family, every citizen? How does a criminal network operate with the precision of a corporate enterprise? On Weymouth Street, investigators uncovered a cartel-style operation that had been meticulously organized for over a decade. At the top stood Jose Antonio Morales Neves, known on the streets as Flaco, and his right-hand man, Ramon Montanez. Together, they orchestrated a system where every role was defined: dealers, enforcers, lookouts, runners, and case managers, each accountable for the flow of narcotics from Puerto Rico and California to Philadelphia. Handwritten schedules, ledgers detailing profits, and rosters of street dealers revealed a chilling blend of business acumen and ruthless enforcement. Fentanyl, a drug so lethal that milligrams can be fatal, and cocaine were distributed openly, creating a public health crisis in the heart of Philadelphia. The gang's strategy relied on both intimidation and logistical mastery. Tenants in controlled properties received free rent in exchange for hosting operations. Streets were patrolled to prevent rival incursions, and violence was deployed strategically to maintain compliance and fear. Music videos featuring firearms broadcast the gang's dominance and served as warnings to competitors. In essence, this was not mere street-level crime, it was an industrial-scale narcotics enterprise, exploiting every vulnerability in urban infrastructure and social oversight. Authorities noted the resilience of the organization. Even as federal agents dismantled segments of the network, smaller crews moved quickly to fill the void, demonstrating the systemic challenges in eradicating entrenched criminal operations. Surveillance, undercover operations, and digital monitoring were crucial to penetrating these layers. Over years, investigators pieced together a network that spanned cities and states, revealing how illicit economies exploit gaps in law enforcement coordination. By tracking shipments, following money trails, and correlating intelligence intelligence across jurisdictions, officials were able to understand the full scale of the enterprise, a feat rarely achieved against organized urban gangs. From a strategic perspective, the dismantling of the Weymouth Street Gang exemplifies a shift in domestic counter-narcotics operations. Under the Trump administration, interagency cooperation has emphasized combining federal, state, and local resources, integrating intelligence with tactical execution. Experts highlight the importance of targeting leadership hierarchies rather than street-level operatives alone, as eliminating the command structure disrupts distribution chains, financial management, and enforcement capabilities. The approach mirrors international anti-cartel strategies, demonstrating the United States' commitment to applying military-style coordination to domestic law enforcement without overstepping civil liberties. The human impact on the community was profound. For residents, years of fear, addiction, and intimidation were suddenly interrupted by a massive law enforcement presence. Families witnessed a sudden reclamation of their streets. Children could walk past previously dangerous corners without apprehension. Yet the social trauma remains. The normalization of crime had left deep psychological scars, and while arrests signal change, recovery for the neighborhood will require sustained investment in public safety, health services, and community rebuilding. Residents' trust in institutions is being tested, highlighting the delicate balance between forceful intervention and community engagement. As investigators cataloged evidence and arrested key figures, one reality became clear: urban drug cartels operate like corporations, and defeating them requires precision, persistence, and adaptability. How can authorities ensure that dismantling one operation does not merely allow another to rise in its place? Can federal oversight combined with community initiatives create lasting safety on streets long dominated by fear? Could Philadelphia witness a federal crackdown of historic proportions? The Weymouth Street raid has been called the largest federal indictment in the city in over a century. 33 individuals were charged, 32 of whom are now in custody, connected to networks reaching Delaware, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico. United States Attorney David Metcalf emphasized that this case represents more than arrests. It is a systemic strike against a criminal enterprise that poisoned neighborhoods for years. The FBI director himself described the operation as one of the most impressive gang takedowns he has ever witnessed, noting the precision, scope, and interagency coordination required to execute it successfully. The investigation, spanning nearly a decade, revealed the operational sophistication of the gang. Dealers worked around the clock, shifting locations and abandoning phones and vehicles to evade detection. Leaders kept strict schedules, distributed duties among trusted lieutenants, and enforced compliance through a combination of intimidation and violence. The gang's activities included not just sales, but financial management, territorial control, and logistical coordination. Handwritten ledgers detailed profits, while lookouts and enforcers maintained dominance over the streets. The audacity of such organization in a residential neighborhood exposed the depth of the challenge law enforcement faced. Strategically, the takedown reflects a broader federal initiative to secure American cities against organized crime while maintaining legal integrity. Under President Donald Trump, resources from federal, state, and local agencies, including specialized task forces, were mobilized to combine intelligence, tactical execution, and legal oversight. Officials stressed the importance of coordination. Raids were synchronized to prevent information leaks, ensuring that no segment of the organization could escape. This method illustrates how domestic law enforcement is increasingly adopting strategies akin to military operations, balancing operational aggressiveness with the preservation of civil liberties. The human toll of the gang's decade-long reign was staggering. Residents endured daily exposure to lethal substances, often fearing retaliation if they spoke to authorities. Families were displaced, children exposed to violence, and community cohesion eroded. The sudden appearance of armored vehicles, snipers, and helicopters during the raid was jarring, yet for many it marked the first moment of hope in years. Witnessing arrests and the confiscation of drugs offered a tangible sign that the federal government was capable of restoring safety and dignity to their streets. Key developments extended beyond the immediate neighborhood. Authorities tracked shipments and financial flows to a billion-dollar cocaine seizure at the Port of Philadelphia, demonstrating the gang's integration into transnational drug trafficking networks. The Weymouth operation was part of a continuum of intelligence-led actions aimed at dismantling the supply chain from overseas to local streets. Experts note that by addressing both distribution and procurement, law enforcement can create systemic disruption, making it harder for criminal networks to reconstitute. As Philadelphia reflects on this historic intervention, one question lingers: can federal authorities sustain momentum and prevent new criminal hierarchies from emerging, or will gaps in oversight allow the cycle of violence and narcotics trafficking to repeat elsewhere in the nation? Who were the masterminds behind this sprawling criminal enterprise? At the helm stood José Antonio Morales Naves, known as Flaco, and his lieutenant Ramon Montanez. Prosecutors described their operation as a cartel-style organization, extending from Puerto Rico to the streets of Philadelphia. Every detail of the enterprise was meticulously recorded, handwritten schedules dictated shifts for dealers, and lookouts, ledgers, tracked profits, and instructions ensured territory was defended with violence when necessary. Housing arrangements reinforced control as tenants received free rent for cooperating with distribution activities. The gang operated with chilling precision, combining business acumen with intimidation to dominate the community for over a decade. The operation resembled a corporate structure. Runners transported narcotics from Puerto Rico and California. Case managers supervised storage and distribution. Enforcers maintained territorial control. Street dealers executed sales, and leadership coordinated finances and logistics. Threats of assault and murder were employed strategically to maintain compliance and silence dissent. Music videos flaunting firearms amplified fear and reinforced the gang's reputation. This systematic approach allowed the gang to operate openly on Weymouth Street, turning a residential neighborhood into a hub for industrial-scale narcotics distribution. Federal officials emphasized that dismantling the leadership hierarchy was critical. Arresting street-level dealers alone would not suffice. The true disruption came from removing the strategists who orchestrated every movement. United States Attorney David Metcalf noted that the gang's corporate-style efficiency allowed it to evade law enforcement for years. Investigators uncovered sophisticated methods to avoid surveillance, destroy evidence, and intimidate witnesses. The legal strategy mirrored the tactical operation by coordinating warrants, raids, and arrests across multiple locations simultaneously. Authorities prevented the leadership from communicating or relocating before capture. Strategically, the takedown highlights the challenges of modern urban law enforcement. Under President Donald Trump, federal agencies have emphasized combining intelligence gathering, surveillance, and legal precision. The operation demonstrates the U.S. commitment to applying military-grade coordination to domestic security, targeting entire criminal networks rather than isolated actors. Experts note that dismantling hierarchical leadership and cutting supply chains increases the likelihood of long-term disruption, signaling to other criminal organizations that federal oversight is vigilant and relentless. The human impact was profound. Residents who had lived under constant fear saw their streets reclaimed. Children could navigate sidewalks without encountering dealers or witnessing violence. Yet the social trauma remains. Decades of exposure to crime and addiction cannot be erased overnight. Community leaders emphasize that rebuilding trust requires sustained investment in education, public health, and policing. Even as arrests were made, the message to the neighborhood was clear: safety and dignity are being restored, but vigilance remains essential. As law enforcement secured homes, confiscated drugs, and collected evidence, the broader question emerged: can the elimination of leadership and disruption of distribution networks create lasting safety, or will opportunistic criminal actors fill the void, continuing the cycle of fear and addiction? What happens when one criminal network falls only to have another rise in its place? Federal and local authorities discovered that even as the Weymouth Street trafficking organization was dismantled, smaller crews moved quickly to fill the vacuum. Within days, law enforcement targeted another well-structured network around the 5th and Cornwall intersection, as well as the 2900 block of Lawrence Street. Investigators operating under undercover surveillance for months observed rapid hand-to-hand exchanges, coordinated transportation of narcotics, and a complex hierarchy assigning roles for packaging, street distribution, and money collection. This second operation mirrored the first, demonstrating the resilience and adaptability of organized crime in Philadelphia. During coordinated raids across 14 locations, authorities seized 57 firearms, including personally made firearms, PMFs, high-capacity rifles, and pistols, stolen weapons, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Law enforcement also confiscated 12 kilograms of cocaine, 50 pounds of marijuana, $275,000 in cash, and vehicles used for trafficking. A total of 21 individuals were charged, 16 arrested, while the ringleader Jimmy Torres remained at large. His operations spanned Philadelphia to Puerto Rico, managing shipments and finances while evading capture. Notably, Torres' son Matthew Torres and associates such as Johnny Bartolome, who stored large quantities of narcotics, were apprehended. Strategically, these follow-up raids illustrate the persistence required to combat urban drug networks. Experts note that eliminating a single gang is rarely sufficient. Law enforcement must anticipate succession and disruption. The Trump administration has emphasized continuous intelligence sharing between federal, state, and local local agencies to ensure sustained pressure on criminal enterprises. Multi-layered operations now combine covert surveillance, tactical raids, and forensic tracking of financial and logistical networks, mirroring the methods used in counter-narcotics operations abroad. The human impact remains striking. Residents previously terrorized by one gang now witness decisive intervention in successive networks. Families begin to experience reprieve from intimidation and violence. Yet the psychological effects of constant threat persist. Neighborhood recovery requires long-term community engagement, including education, mental health resources, and law enforcement visibility. The raids demonstrate the potential to restore dignity and safety, but highlight the delicate balance between aggressive intervention and preserving trust between authorities and residents. Key developments extended beyond local enforcement. Investigators connected these networks to large-scale trafficking operations, including a billion-dollar cocaine shipment intercepted at the Port of Philadelphia. Containers holding 33,000 pounds of cocaine, nearly doubling nationwide seizures for the year, revealed the international reach of the criminal enterprise. Authorities traced shipping routes from Chile through Panama and the Bahamas, confirming that these urban gangs were integrated into global narcotics logistics. This link underscores that urban crime is not isolated. Domestic violence, addiction, and fear are connected to international trafficking networks. As Philadelphia law enforcement continues to respond, the enduring question emerges: can authorities maintain pressure to prevent emerging gangs from exploiting gaps in oversight, or will transnational criminal networks perpetually adapt to reclaim territory and influence? How could a single shipment shock even veteran investigators at the Port of Philadelphia federal authorities uncovered one of the largest cocaine seizures in U.S. history? 33,000 pounds of the drug, valued at over $1 billion on the street. The MSC Guyane, a seemingly ordinary cargo ship, became the epicenter of a transnational criminal investigation. Using X-ray scanning canine units and coordinated boarding by Customs, ICE, Homeland Security, and Philadelphia police officials discovered the contraband hidden in 7 shipping containers. The scale was staggering, nearly double the total annual U.S. cocaine seizures prior to this single haul. Investigators traced the route from Chile, passing through Panama, stopping in the Bahamas, and then north to Philadelphia. Along the way, smugglers had employed floating nets off the coast of Peru to load drugs clandestinely. Crew members were questioned, and several were charged for coordinating the shipment, while the shipping company maintained that traffickers often exploit commercial vessels. Authorities now link this shipment to the same networks responsible for poisoning neighborhoods in Philadelphia, confirming that urban drug crises are fueled by sophisticated international supply chains. Strategically, this seizure underscores the challenges of domestic security in an interconnected world. Under President Donald Trump's administration, law enforcement increasingly combines local tactical operations with global intelligence efforts, reflecting a doctrine of preemptive intervention. The operation demonstrates the necessity of integrating port security, customs inspection, and federal coordination to prevent illicit goods from reaching urban distribution networks. Analysts suggest that addressing supply at the international level complements local interventions, creating a multi-layered deterrent against both criminal organizations and the violence they propagate. The human impact is both immediate and symbolic. Philadelphia neighborhoods long terrorized by accessible narcotics now see the tangible effects of breaking the supply chain. Yet the broader implications resonate beyond city limits. Every container intercepted represents lives potentially saved from addiction, overdose, and related violence. Families affected by the decade-long flood of fentanyl and cocaine in Kensington and neighboring communities experience renewed hope, but the psychological and social scars require sustained intervention. The seizure is a stark reminder of how international criminal logistics directly affect domestic life. The tactical execution was meticulous. Hundreds of law enforcement officers backed by aerial surveillance coordinated the inspection, boarding, and seizure. Each brick of cocaine was cataloged, the evidence meticulously documented for prosecution. This level of precision illustrates how federal authorities are applying military-grade planning to domestic enforcement, balancing aggressive action with legal oversight. Analysts note that operations of this scale send a clear message to both domestic gangs and international cartels. U.S. authorities are prepared to pursue criminal networks from the streets to the ports, leaving no safe harbor. As Philadelphia reflects on this historic operation, a critical question emerges. How many other shipments have already reached urban streets unnoticed? And how can authorities sustain vigilance to prevent future waves of destruction? Will continuous interagency coordination and global intelligence integration finally tip the balance, protecting communities while asserting America's strategic and moral authority in the fight against organized crime? The Weymouth Street operation represents a historic federal strike against organized crime in Philadelphia, dismantling a decade-long open-air drug market and arresting key members of the cartel-style Weymouth Street trafficking organization. Led by Jose Antonio Morales Nieves, known as Flaco, and his lieutenant Ramon Montanez, the gang operated with corporate-like efficiency, distributing fentanyl and cocaine from Puerto Rico and California to Philadelphia neighborhoods. Handwritten schedules, profit ledgers, and systematic enforcement revealed the depth of their operations, while violent intimidation maintained control over residents. Follow-up raids across Philadelphia and Levittown uncovered additional networks, seizing firearms, narcotics, cash, and vehicles, highlighting the persistence and adaptability of criminal enterprises. The investigation culminated in a staggering cocaine seizure at the Port of Philadelphia, 33,000 pounds, valued at over $1 billion, exposing the transnational logistics fueling local street-level drug crises. Authorities combined intelligence, surveillance, and tactical operations, balancing aggressive law enforcement with civil liberties, signaling the U.S. commitment to reclaiming neighborhoods and asserting domestic security under President Donald Trump's administration. For residents, these operations restored a measure of safety and dignity, yet the social and psychological impacts of years of crime remain. The raids emphasize that urban drug crises are deeply connected to international trafficking, demanding sustained vigilance. The ultimate question persists: can authorities prevent new networks from rising, or will the cycle of violence and addiction